Meeting to order, and I see nobody here for public comment, so we will go to closed session.
Wait, we got to do the roll call.
Oh,
Roll call
approval of
and
the
approval
agenda. We are pulling items 7 and 8.
There were bid projects.
So if someone wants to approve the agenda with items 7 and 8
Can we
pulled.
do roll call vote first? Am I supposed to?
Roll. Mayor Breeden. Here?
I approve.
No, here.
Here.
Here. I don't know.
Lindsay
I can't
Stevens.
hear.
Here. Wallace Martin.
Here, approve, yep.
Scott Heyman.
Here.
Mike Maurer.
Here.
5 present.
I move approval of the agenda with items 7 and 8 pulled.
Second.
Please vote.
Oops. Surprise.
Please vote. 5 ayes, motion
Okay.
carries.
Now we will go into closed session.
The first I've
Wallace
seen.
here? Wallace, are you there? Okay. We're going to call the meeting back to order again. And Scott, would you lead us in the pledge, please? Please stand and place your hand over your heart. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'm going to ask you all to stand, and remember, this is going to be a very private talk with you and our Lord. So please, just when we ask for the invocation, just make it a 30 seconds and say what you want to say to yourself. So I thank you all. Thank you. Please be seated. Okay, we are going to have an attorney's report. And just so for your information, we approved the agenda with pulling number 7 and number 8. So we will not be discussing 7 and 8. Okay, please.
The City Council met in closed session to discuss with the City Attorney undisclosed potential litigation, one case. City Council received a report from the City Attorney, but no reportable action was taken. Madam Mayor, that concludes the report.
Thank you. If you all join me up front here, we have some pretty extraordinary people we want to recognize. So please come up front.
Anna Ball, would you please come forward? Take the forefront. I'll read this to you. Proclamation of the City of Ridgecrest, California, honoring Ridgecrest Police Clerk Anna Ball upon the occasion of her retirement. Whereas Anna Ball began her full-time career with the city on July 27, 2000, as a police clerk for the Ridgecrest Police Department, and whereas Anna Ball worked a variety of assignments throughout her career, including dispatching 290 sex offender compliance, training compliance with California police officer standards, transports, live scan, report releasing, and coordinated with the court on a warrant purging project. And whereas Anna Ball was selected as Employee of the Year for the Ridgecrest Police Department in the year 2010 and received letters of appreciation for her good work. And whereas Anna Ball has continuously maintained an exceptionally high level of professionalism and dedication to duty, even through power outages and other major instances. And whereas Anna Ball has retired after providing over 18 and a half years of faithful and honorable service to our community, now therefore be it proclaimed, the City Council of the City of Ridgecrest does hereby recognize and thank Ridgecrest Police Clerk Anna Ball for her professional and personal dedication to the City of Ridgecrest on the occasion of her retirement, proclaimed this 20th day of March. You want to say a few words?
No, just thank you.
They're all set for you.
Get up there.
Still get to tell you what to do.
6 more days.
Yeah, 6 more days. So Anna's list is quite long of what she did for us at the department, but one of the ones that's not on the proclamation is putting up with us. So she was very good at that. If we got out of line, she put us in our place. So, Anna, we're going to miss you. She's going to Reno, well, just outside of Reno, up there with her grandkids and daughter and son-in-law. So she's going to go up there and help them and be the asset to Reno now. So we got you a little something, Anna. So don't drop it. So thanks again, and we're going to miss you.
So many years. Thank you. Wallace? Did you want a picture of all of us? Okay.
All right, I'd like to call up Alicia Owen. So Alicia is a senior at Burroughs High School. She's the daughter of Allison and Todd Owen. She entered into a Kern County essay contest very recently, and students had to pick an issue of local or national importance and explain how Abraham Lincoln might have dealt with an issue of today if he were still alive today. So Alicia competed with students from 15 other high schools around Kern County, and she won a second-place scholarship for $1,000, and we're very, very proud of her. And also, as a follow-up, as a youth leader, she's been accepted now to 3 universities and making her decision of which one that she wants to go to, and she plans to get her master's from San Diego State University. So, Alicia, I'm very proud to present this award to you on behalf of the Mayor of Ridgecrest and the City Council. It says Youth Achievement. This certificate is awarded to Alicia Owen March 20th in recognition of for earning a Kern County Scholarship Award for your outstanding leadership essay, and presented by the Mayor and all of the council members. So, congratulations, and we'll do that. And then the second thing is, which is you get an added bonus because y'all paid for the extra seats to sit up front. Alicia is going to deliver her award-winning talk to us tonight. Okay? Thank you. I'll turn it over to you.
Abraham Lincoln was our first Republican president. The Republican Party today is quite different from the Republican Party of Lincoln's era. Even though the times differ, our current Republican President Trump resembles similar leadership styles of Abraham Lincoln. A current national issue in the United States is the government shutdown. Our current political parties cannot come together and agree on decisions for the good of our country. In Lincoln's inaugural address, he appealed for preservation of the Union, which in today's times, President Trump is striving for. Lincoln declared that America will never be destroyed from the outside. If we falter and lose our freedoms, it will be because we destroyed ourselves. Lincoln is making it apparent in this statement that if we as a nation cannot come together as a union to compromise and make decisions for the good of our country, we will lose our freedom. This loss of freedom pushes our nation towards socialism. Our country was built on freedom, as both Lincoln and Trump have reiterated. President Trump recently made an address during his State of the Union speech that we will not become a socialist country. However, if we cannot come together as a union, we will fall to socialism. In order to preserve our union today, Lincoln would not take no for an answer, a lot like Trump is doing by standing his ground for what he believes is best for a nation as a whole. Lincoln's style of government had been trial and error. He had endless failures before he became president, forcing him to learn from his mistakes. Lincoln's perseverance in government stood out. If one style or form of approach was not working, he did not hesitate to change his approach. Abraham Lincoln embodies the United States' core values and virtues: liberty, equality, and self-government. Lincoln had firm beliefs on what he viewed to be right and wrong. But at the end of the day, his overall goal was to create a country that was unified. At times, even members of Lincoln's own political party disagreed with his decisions, especially when it came to the topic of war. One of Lincoln's biggest standpoints was the abolition of slavery. Lincoln's goal was to maintain the Union, even if it meant allowing slavery to continue, which enraged Northern abolitionists in the party. Trump is dealing with similar conflicts today, with members of his own political party disagreeing with his decisions. Lincoln was an outstanding president because of his style of governing. He was successful at getting things done because he knew how to compromise, and he kept his goal of preserving the Union as his top priority while maintaining integrity in office. He was determined to keep our nation unified and maintain the firm principles laid down by the Constitution. Trump is determined to bring together our divided nation. Lincoln would fully stand behind Trump's statement that this is not a Democratic agenda, this is not a Republican agenda, this is an American agenda.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, the next item. Thank you all, and thank your parents too, please. Good job. Okay, public comment. Persons wishing to address the council on matters that are within the council's jurisdiction and do not already appear on the agenda may do so at this time. Pursuant to the Brown Act, the City Council may not take action on that item that does not appear on the agenda. Speakers are limited to 5 minutes. Public comment section of the agenda is limited to a total of 1 hour. Each speaker is asked to provide his or her name. Is there any public comment, please?
Dave Matthews, address is on file. Alicia, kudos. That is going to be on the city webpage, and when I get home, I'm going to record that and put it in my archives. That was great. Thank you. I'm not sure whether there's going to be anything in committee reports about what took place at the last meeting. Even though I wasn't here, I was home watching it on the internet. The thing that really disturbed me about that meeting was the financial report that was given by our auditors or whatever. That is the first one that I have ever recalled that there was actually some concern about. And I hope that the Finance Committee is starting to look into that and see where we're going to go. I don't remember exactly what they said, but I will look it up when I get home. And anyway, I will look forward to hearing more about what's happening there. So thank you.
The Finance Committee is looking into that. Thank you, Dave.
Good evening. Member Eden, council members, hello. I'm Scott O'Neill, longtime Ridgecrest citizen and executive director of the Indian Wells Valley Economic Development Corporation. This week I sent you all a letter to make you aware of a difficulty our current real estate developers are having completing their projects in Ridgecrest. This letter delineated some of those challenges and also made some recommendations and outlined a few urgencies needed for action. Recently, the EDC and the Ridgecrest Area Association of Realtors became aware of these challenges, and we hosted a number of meetings to listen to our developers and builders, some with city staff present. You need to know that there's a lot of frustrations and hard feelings around. Some of these are so frustrated that they have quit building, abandoned their projects, or have expressed they will no longer build inside the city. Over the past couple decades, there have been little local development. Attracting outside investors and developers to help meet emerging needs has been difficult. I know, I've talked to many of them. But we are succeeding, and our local investors and developers have really stepped forward. We need to make building the Ridgecrest of tomorrow a friendly experience. We cannot afford to drive away any of our developers because we are difficult to deal with. Right now, developing in Ridgecrest is deemed a nightmare. Our processes are out of date, unable to handle the increasing demand. They result in numerous surprises and fees and permit costs that often change midstream, usually because they've been miscalculated and then misrecalculated. There are outlandish requirements for off-site improvements, those mandated upgrades to public infrastructure that projects are expected to fund. There are seemingly arbitrary and inconsistent interpretations of codes and standards. While these are eventually resolved, it's not usually at first pass. The resolution routinely rests with the city manager, but this happens only after wasted hours and additional, often unnecessary costs of professional services. Later, when compromise is reached, it's often poorly documented, if at all. And then memory is relied upon. And we all know how well that works. I asked the City Council to establish a board to help the city staff prepare a guidebook that lays out all the information a developer and builder might need to get through their plans through the city and their work approved. As a minimum, this guide would cover a major planning and building processes, fees and permit structure, identify key players and their superiors, identify all pertinent codes and standards, especially those that are peculiar to the city, how money paid to the city will be managed, expensed, and or returned, lay out conflict resolution process, and identify all contractors or agents who are empowered to act for the city and their fees. Such a guide would eliminate the surprises, help manage expectations, provide for transparency, enable effective planning, and generally improve the experience of building inside the city. Also, there are immediate actions needed to address three critical issues. First, the city needs a clear strategy regarding off-site improvements. This needs to be based on solid rationale, be reasonable, negotiable, and fairly assessed. Secondly, the fees and permit structure needs to be simplified and consistent with that of other communities our size. Lastly, the city needs to ensure its employees accurately interpret codes and standards are open to alternative interpretations. They need to be biased towards accepting the work of state licensed professionals who are charged to meet these codes and standards in preparing their project plans. In closing, I know the city is already working to resolve some of these issues. Unfortunately, they all need to be resolved, and time is short. We are entering into a period of accelerating development that I think will persist. Frustrations are already high, and much of the cause is self-inflicted. With outside investors and developers, we don't have many chances. I want all our developers to succeed, to have a good experience in completing their projects, and if they do, maybe, just maybe, they'll start another project. Developing in Ridgecrest does not have to be the nightmare it currently is. Let's band together and fix the problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. I'd like to say something here, too. As you are aware, we have been meeting with the developers and many of the builders for months now, trying to do the very thing you're asking for. It is not a short-term solution. It will be a long-term solution because we're trying to change those things that need to be changed and address those issues that we can. Does that mean that it's going to be done tomorrow? No. It will not, but we've been working on it. We've had 3 meetings with the developers, is that correct?
At least.
3, 2?
At least.
3 meetings with the developers asking, what would you like to see? What do you think? This is what we have so far. Where are you and how do you feel about it? We've got a lot of input, and at this point in time, I don't think it will be a whole lot longer before we can bring these items back to council and say, and the planning commission to say, this is what we're doing. What do you think? And Ron, would you like to address anything else on that? Because we agree with what you've said, for the most part.
Yeah, some of the biggest issues we addressed over the last year, we did have significant problems with our building inspection, which we addressed. And we have put into place some other processes dealing with larger projects. Do plan to come back to City Council in May with our cost allocation fee study that we've been working on for a while, which I think is one of the problematic issues that we've had. We have not updated our fees since 1994, which means is that the city has fallen way behind in how much we recoup in our costs for the builders, getting stuff permitted and such. So we are working on it. I'm well aware of it. We have had a few hiccups when it comes to off-site improvements. As in all cases, the city's looking for stuff to be completed that has a nexus to the project, and obviously that is always up to interpretation by the builder. Some builders do not want to do off-site improvement because it improves their costs, but we always have to be looking out for the city. So we are open to meeting with the builders. We have been meeting with the builders, and like I've expressed to council for some time now, this is a top priority that we're working on trying to solve.
I think it's important we all recognize the issues. There isn't anybody who doesn't. And I think it's even more important to recognize that, as we said, for 20 years, most of these things have not been looked at again and addressed in a manner that is appropriate. And so we are doing that. We are doing it now. Are we doing it as fast as we can? Yes. Is it going to be done tomorrow? It will not be, but will be done very soon because it must be. It is in our own best self-interest to do that. Not just the city's self-interest, but the entire valley and the developers, and be able to grow and meet the concerns of the Navy and who want housing and the builders who want to supply that. We have to give them a clear cost of what it is. I think you referred to it as a guide. I think that clearly has to be done, and that's what we're working on. Did any other council members want to say anything?
Well, yeah, no, I read the letter, Scott, and I applaud the EDC. This is not some kind of a generic thing. Your letter is extremely specific with, probably 15 solid, definitive points that need to be addressed. It's not let's improve our process deal. So I applaud the letter from being incredibly succinct, and I applaud the concept of a guide. I'm a guide master guy, because I think when you have a guide, when every single issue is addressed, boom, this is the problem, this is how we're going to deal with it, here is the answer, here is the contact to talk to, next, you address all of the things that you're concerned about and not cherry pick 1 or 2 or 3 things, and we're working on it, thanks very much. So I think your letter to the city was very pointed, made excellent points. I think we need to develop an excellent guide, exactly addressing every single point that you brought up, not just 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. So I'd like to move that we move to get this thing done within the year, and sooner if possible. Many of the things that you brought up is a matter of cleaning up policy, looking at how industry best practices are done with other cities, snag their paragraph and policy, we put it together and vote on this thing, so we improve the thing exponentially across the board. So I just want to thank you for the letter, and I say yes, we need to do all of the things listed in the letter, because they're very specific. They're not general, very specific. So thank you.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I'd just like to say I think we need to take this to the economic development community to work on the development guidebook, so that way we can sit down and have a more one-on-one conversation, and that way we can get their problem solved, and then we can bring it back to council. So.
Okay, thank you. I know why you're here.
Really? Surprise, surprise. Madam Mayor, City Council, my name is Linda Fuller. My address is on file. I am here this evening as a private citizen, as a taxpayer, a property owner. I wasn't able to attend the last meeting, but I did want to go again into the parks assessment proposal. I have done some research. When I first learned about the proposal, I had only had the knowledge just for a few days, and I hadn't done a whole lot of research and stuff. So my first comment to the people here this evening is appearance, 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 appearance. What do things look like to John Q. Public? When I spoke a month ago regarding the parks assessment proposal, I had just learned a few days prior and had not had time to do any research. After talking with some local property owners, a few of the local pastors, reading letters to the editor, and some very pungent comments of Skip Gorman's in the Daily Independent, I am not saying no. I am for the assessment. What I am saying is, not now. Pay attention. Do your due diligence. Allow the property owners of Ridgecrest to say their piece. Get a committee going. I don't have a problem paying my share. I want to pay my responsibility for the quality of life in our city. I've been here since 1959. That's longer than some of you are old. But things are not being done according to what I see as protocol. The first thing I find interesting is that when I spoke at the City Council on that Wednesday evening, within 3 days, I received the proposal in the mail, and I'm going, oh, wow, how did you do that in 3 days? Was this pre-planned? Had this already been done? Because I know you don't make something up like this overnight. You don't print it up. You don't write it up. That makes me question things. The second thing I noticed was the return envelope said, do not open. I'm an adult. I understand do not. But what does that imply? And what does it look like? Confused me. You're going to get this ballot back, but yet you can't do anything with it. You can't open it. So what good did it do? Why did you spend that money to do all this, and what are you going to do with it? Again, each person, appearance, each person has their own individual interpretation. Potato, potato. I said the same thing, but did you hear what I said? I know what I said. I don't know what you heard. But the council voted unanimously. That's good. I applaud you guys. You just are really a super great board. And I've had conversations to people in regards to this board. Past boards have had issues. You guys seem to be very on the money, very workable, work amongst each other. Again, I ask, let's not do things immaturely. Let's do our due diligence. Let's have our public meetings. I would like to suggest an oversight committee, and I would like to be a part of that committee. The public has a right to know what is being planned for us, what we're paying for, why we're paying for it, and how the City Council is planning on taking their responsibility. I believe that what I'm referring to is transparency. I would like to see as a part of the sunset clause, I would personally like to see the sunset clause. I would like to see a sunset clause put in the information. I would like acceleration clause removed. To quote Skip Gorman in the newspaper, he said, just add a sunset clause, delete the cost of living escalator. I have somewhat of a history in the personal exposure of the monies that has been received in and around Ridgecrest. I would like to, thank you.
Do you have, can you briefly close it up, or do you have a lot more?
I'm actually almost finished.
Let me see if we can answer some of the questions. Ron, do you want to address some of those?
Well, I do have one closing statement.
Okay.
And the one thing that I find very, very interesting, because the other part is insignificant, what I would like to remind the council, the eye is on the sparrow and the community is watching.
Thank you.
Just one brief comment. The do not open is when you return it back to the city clerk. It's not supposed to be open until the public hearing on April 17th.
I assume such, yes. But that was an assumption.
And we just didn't make this up. It's been being worked on for a long period of time. We had 2 meetings here about it before the council voted to send it to the public for their ballot.
Okay, thank you. But you guys do an excellent job. I commend
Thank you.
And the new people, the young people, good blood.
Linda, I thought you were going to come up here and say hooray, hooray for Monday.
Oh, and Hallelujah Days, the senior center is having lunch on Monday.
All right.
Yay. Very good. Thank you.
I surprised you, didn't I?
Yeah, you did surprise me. That's what I thought you were going to say. I'm sorry, Pat.
Sweet. Good evening, Pat Ferris. My address is on file, I think. Not Irving, Texas. I first of all want to thank Scott for outlining some of the critical needs that need to be corrected. As we're so fortunate to have someone like Scott and as the executive director of our economic development. Scott has a vision. We've watched that for years as he led as a technical director on the base. And now we're so fortunate to have him on this side of the fence. And I think we're making his job very difficult. If you don't have someone leading an economic development, you're probably not going to go anywhere. We have someone to lead us, and we need to find ways to support in every way we can those efforts. We don't often, or as often as we need, have leadership that has a vision of what we can become as a community. And Scott does have that. I have actually been, if you recall, Madam Mayor, when the urgent cry went out from China Lake after the Outlook Conference year before this Outlook Conference, about the urgent need for housing because of all of the new young professionals that they need to hire for the base. And that was, it sounded like, well, we should be on go here for a future, because it's not just this year, but the next year and ongoing that China Lake says they're going to be hiring, and we do not have adequate housing, and there was some kind of a limited list of even rentals available. And I remember that you committed to streamlining the permitting process for the city, and you even spoke for the county. And so I was very encouraged, but it doesn't look like that's happened. And I know you can't do it alone, but certainly we need to commit to this task. I'm a part of one of the developments here, and we have to talk hard and fast to keep these developers with us, because they get discouraged. And when you go out and get major investors and you think you have things on the line, and then you have to keep moving the numbers, it really makes it critical. And it's not just this time, but over the years, we've had this complaint, and we've seen people who have had to stop major, very huge developments in this community because they had to give up because of the roadblocks. So when you said that, you kind of said, this will not be a short-term solution. And then you said, very soon. So I hope somewhere in between those two goals we can find something, but it would seem like would be helpful to, this is such a huge issue. It might be advisable to look for a consultant. I don't think you're going to figure this out, but I'm just sorry to say, I just don't think you're going to figure this out because I think there's a lack of experience. And I think you might consider bringing in a consultant to help build this guide and bring in some developments. We have developers who do huge developments all over the world, and they could certainly offer some good counsel. And I think it might be advisable to pull together a consultant and use a Scott O'Neill and some of these developers that have been through this, know how it works, and really get busy on, because we're not going to be able to meet the criteria that and the needs for housing, and it's going to really put a halt on the kind of growth that we want to see in this community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Council. Mike Neal. I'll address one peripheral issue before you get to what I'm going to address that has to do with
Mike, could you
what you're
get a
handing
little
out.
closer to the...
Sure.
Thank you.
Is that better? Okay. Last council meeting, I brought up the issue of potential conflict of interest on your Parks and Recreations Director and the Parks Assessment tax. And, statements made after that, well, it takes a few more than just a few minutes to think about that by your city attorney. And I said, well, if I was an attorney, it'd take me more than a few more minutes because I wouldn't make much money if I just get it done in 2 or 3 minutes. But for myself, I was being truthful. It really didn't take me more than about 3 to 5 minutes to consider it, to see that there might be a problem there. So now, what I'd like to talk about now is something that hasn't really been addressed about the proposed parks tax assessment. And that is and I've mentioned this several times before, actually, more briefly, is the process. And what this gets down to, the heart of, is how does our city government function? What are your duties as a council member? What are the powers and duties of the city manager, which you have in front of you? Now recall that this process was started, to the best of my memory, hiring of a consultant to look into this, the city manager going around town, speaking to civic groups, basically propagandizing this proposed tax, the great need for the parks to have more money, before anything was ever even said to the council whatsoever. This is for an issue to tax the people. Now, you stand in our stead as our representatives on this government. Look at the first section of what I just handed out. It says that the city manager is the administrative head of the government of the city, and he functions under the direction and control of the council. Further down in subsection I, where it addresses financial matters of the city. City manager's job is to keep the council fully advised of financial conditions and needs of the city. To be done properly, to have a tax proposed to the people, the city manager should have done exactly what is said there in subsection I and inform this council of the need. And then, as has been said, I believe at least 4 times up here by myself and other persons, we should have had discussion and debate about that. We never did. We had one workshop, which, it's a little inconvenient for citizens to have to come to a separate meeting. The workshop itself I didn't find real informative, to be truthful. Not recorded for anybody to hear whatsoever. Nothing in these chambers going on, discussing about it. Just the city manager pushing this forward and the council rubber stamping the proposal to put the tax up for a vote. Now, the tax itself, tax by government is the taking, essentially the taking by force of the people's property. If you don't pay it, there's going to be consequences. More particularly in a property tax, if you don't like the tax for whatever reason, and you say, I'm not paying that, wait about 5 years and they'll come take your property from you. It could be a $200,000 or more property. They would just take it from you to get that money. They will do it. It has been done. And that's what it's all about when I'm talking about taking by force of the tax. So, see, I'm almost out of time here. I'll just simply say that it is for this reason primarily that I will not be voting for this tax assessment. I will never support taxes proposed upon the populace of this city that are put forward in an improper fashion. Thank you.
Thank you. Dave, before you speak again, may I ask, is there anybody else who wishes to speak?
I was going to ask him.
Dave, would you wait 1 minute? Because you've already spoken once. So let's let them come up, and then you can go after at the end, please.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah, I'm sneaking behind you.
All right.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and City Council members. My name is Chris Ellis. Lived here for 30-something years. And just want to comment on the parks measure myself. I was fortunate enough to be one of the people that the city manager reached out to early on relative to this measure. And what I could kind of say is, I don't know what happens in closed or open session or what happens relative to the law that Mr. Neal was responding to. However, at that time, I had suggested and got a reasonable response from the city manager that the proposed fee, I'll call it, my opinion wasn't high enough in order to meet the needs, the deficit that we face, and in order to improve the quality of life. And Mr. Strand pointed out that frankly they had done some studies and this was about the best that we could hope to do and hope to pass through, and it's was a start. But after getting the mailer and taking a look at the magnitude of the amount of work that we've got to take care of, and actually some of the items that are on there, became a bit concerned that it looks like we've got a lot of maintenance items on there that maybe we've fallen behind on. And I'm not sure that that's initially what this type of fee would take care of, but maybe it does. At the end of the day, it would be helpful to me, and I intend to vote yes on it, as I said I would at the beginning, but I do have some concerns, and what I would like to see is maybe a better prioritization of the items out there, particularly since we have an estimated $600,000 in annual revenues projected for this, and we have $19+ million in projects, so that would take us well out into probably past my life expectancy to getting these things done. So that would be helpful to me. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Okay, is there anybody else who wishes to speak? Okay, Dave, please.
Yes, thank you. With regard to Mr. O'Neill's concerns and letter, I have not seen the letter, but I would like to take a look at it, because in the infrastructure committees for years, we have been hearing about the difficulty, mostly at that time, with building inspections. But it sounds like there's a lot more, many more problems involved now. And my point is that this has been going on for quite a while. Maybe some of the inspection problems could be solved, at least temporarily, if not permanently, if the city considered getting its own building inspector again. We used to have one. If you've been around long enough to remember that, I don't know how long it's been, but the problem has been around, and the other thing is that too many times we get involved with committees and this and studies and this and that and there. It's not just the local governments, it's the damn federal governments and the state governments too. Maybe we just need to get moving and do something. So that is my comments on that particular item. The other thing is about the housing that we're supposedly building for the younger hires that are coming to the base. According to some of their own generation, we only have 12 or 15 years left, so why bother?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to
Okay.
respond. Peggy, can I respond a little bit to that?
Pardon me?
Can I respond?
Please.
Yeah, Mr. Matthews, we have worked considerably on addressing the building inspection issue, and I think we do have it somewhat under control. Some of the issues that we are seeing on top of this is some problems with our general plan and our ordinances. And when we're looking at some things, we'll have builders that will come in and we'll have, let's say, you're discussing whether or not to put in a center median or whether or not to put in landscaping along the edge of a tract development. Our general plan says we have to do that, but we know we have water issues, we know we have other issues we're dealing with, and it is a cost to the builders. And so some of the work that we've been doing is trying to meet with the developers to try and address these issues, and it has at times created some confusion because we're basically not following our general plan or ordinances. We need to change those, and that's one of the things we're working on. And so when we are working with the developers, it does take a little bit of time, because if you're following the rules, it'd be very easy. We just say, this is your development, follow the rule. But because some of the rules we currently have on the books don't make sense, we're working the best we can to be able to make those changes.
Okay.
I wanted to make one point. I think that listening from what Pat Ferris said, and also what Dave said, and also what Scott said, I think that when we're developing this guide and we address each of the 15 or 20 points that you brought up, the other issue that has to be brought up at the end of each paragraph is when. There is no such thing as a legal contract, which I'm sure Keith will tell you, if when is not added to the contract. If there's no date, there's just no contract, you just as soon not have it. And I know that in speaking with several developers also, no names mentioned, it's not important. But 2 years ago, we have a gentleman who has brought 4 different businesses to Ridgecrest. And he flat told me, he said, you're 2 to 3 times. He said, I don't know, I'm looking at 1 or 2 other things I want to bring to town. But he said, you're 2 to 3 times slower than 5 other cities we're doing business in. So he said, I don't know. I can put my money anywhere I want to put it. And you're 2 to 3 times slower in getting all the permits and everything. Well, I think that's a travesty. Should not be, period. So I think we need to find out what the average timeline is. I go back to looking at the top 20 cities that's all around us. You'll hear me saying that till I'm blue in the face. We need to look at all of the cities. That's our competition, all the desert towns that are all around us, of similar size, money, and budget, and take a look at how long it takes them to do every one of the 15 points you bring up. We need to take an average, then maybe we beat it by 10% instead of being over it by 30. Wouldn't that be neat? So I think on this guide that we need to develop, we need to have a when. In other words, this is the prescribed length of time that it takes to do any one of the 10 different permits, and that's it. And that's what we have to meet. And we either have to get more staff to meet it, or we have to bring in a consultant to meet it, but we have to meet it. Because I think all of this business, it's just, to me, it's not complicated. You address Scott's 15 things, and you give a time, and you meet it. That's it. To me, it's not rocket science. Thank you.
Mayor,
Mike?
I just want to, Dave, if you remember a couple years ago, the major problem with the builders was length of time it took to get a permit, and number 2, some of the problems with the inspectors. The city worked on that. The city approved Wildan to do plan checks and inspections, and I haven't heard a builder in town complain about Wildan, where a lot of them are using Wildan now instead of the county, and that problem has been solved, as far as I'm concerned, as a builder and as a relative of a couple other builders. So,
much of the complaints that we heard initially were issues that builders had with the county, and many of those have been addressed. Some of them have not, and that's why many of those issues have been brought into the city, with Wildan taking some of those, because as you recall, the developers had a choice. Do you want to go with Wildan? Do you want to go with your own? Where do you want to go? And this gives them the opportunity. I have no problem with anything Scott said, and the fact that he was willing and offered help and consideration to do this, and that's what we need. And when I say this isn't going to happen tomorrow, but it will happen, and it will happen soon. But we've got to do it right the first time. I don't want to see us to be able to come back and say, oh, we didn't do. And that's why we asked. We've had the 3 meetings with the Board of Realtors, with developers and the builders. And so that's how it isn't going to happen tomorrow, so don't expect it. Anybody who thinks it's going to happen tomorrow, but it's going to take 6 years, absolutely not. We're going to get it done, and we will. We made the promise, and as Pat pointed, I promised this at a year ago, and it's taken that. It's not like we've been sitting around waiting for it to get done. We're doing it.
Well, the other point, in addition to time, the other big one that needs to be the line under the time is cost. What is the average cost? Forgive me, I should have put that in. So I've got a solar contractor friend of mine who beats me up once a month because he's a young engineer, sharp guy, and he looks at all the different costs and he says, do you know that you're 30% more than this city and 22% more of that, 110% more than that for the same permit? Are you aware of that? And I go, well, no, I'm not. So I think when we do our little study of the 20 or 30 cities around us and we look at what is the average time to do these 15 things Scott wants to do, and you say, what is the average cost? Because you create in the mind of the developers a perception that can be completely wrong because they say, this is outrageous. Well, you need to say, well, it's the average cost in Southern California. Oh, so we're 22% less than the average cost in Southern. Well, okay, it is what it is. But I think you need to look at time and you need to look at cost, and it needs to be nailed to the 15 and 20 things that Scott wants in his guide. And then when you go to develop a project, what are the 2 things that developers want to know? How long is it going to take and how much is it going to cost? Then Scott's guide will help.
Okay, thank you. Norm?
Just wanted to make a couple comments. I think...
Can you get a little closer to it? Thank you.
Norman Alexander, my address is on file. President of the Ridgecrest Area Association of Realtors. Couple things. First of all, the city and the city manager has been meeting, as everyone said, and they're working hard at doing this. So I appreciate that effort and working with the builders. One of the things that kind of I'm concerned about is we definitely need to have the guide and support that fully. But there are some things going on right now. My concern is what Mr. Matthews said is there's a long-term thing that we need to get done and get fixed, but we got projects that are going on right now. And those things need to be really hammered out, and we don't have a lot of time to get that done. So I would like to just make sure we don't get spun up on a long-term guide and we've got months to do this or we got a half a year to do this. Long-term, that's one thing, but there are some short-term things that are going that we need to get done. The other thing is looking around, and Scott pointed it out at the Economic Outlook Conference. When we look at other communities our size, our budget's about $9 million. Other communities our size, it's about $30 million. Okay, that in itself is a challenge, and maybe, one of our underlying things that we need to address and how the best way to do that. The other cities may have a lot more staff, have a lot of other things because they have the revenue. And that's just the nature of the environment that we're in, wherein our biggest employer or business does not pay any taxes. So that's something else to consider long term. But my main point was just to make sure we've got some projects going on right now that need looking at and working with. And again, city manager has been talking with those folks and working with them, but we really just need to get things done. Bringing in a consultant sounds like a really good idea. I just wanted to bring that point up.
Yeah.
Thank you, Norm.
Yeah, Mr. Alexander, we have hired a consultant that is helping us with our cost allocation and fee study. And if you look, item 9 tonight is a easement issue with Sunline Development. So we are moving forward on a lot of these projects. We have identified that, the projects that are in the queue, staff is meeting weekly to be able to address these issues and stay proactive.
Okay.
So we are on board. We do have the consultant that's helping us with the cost allocation study. The cost allocation study has to be done and completed and approved by council before we can do the step-by-step process that will allow us to be able to catch some of these shortfalls we have in our permitting process. So we do have a lot of this stuff well identified. It's just a matter of when we get the cost allocation study to council to get it approved, then we go to the next step. But as for the development, specifically the one that Mr. O'Neill is concerned about, Sunland Development, yes, we've had a couple of hiccups in that. But like I said, once again, it's on the agenda for tonight to allow some accommodation for them so they can continue to move forward.
Okay.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Okay, no public comment. We will go on to the consent calendar. All items of the consent calendar are considered to be routine by city staff and will be approved in one motion if no member of the council or the public wishes to comment or ask questions. If comments or discussion is desired by anyone, that item will be removed from the consent calendar and will be considered separately with public comment before the action is taken. Do any members of the council wish to have anything pulled after I read it? Item number 3. Approved draft minutes of the City of Ridgecrest City Council Successor Redevelopment Agency Financing Authority Housing Authority regular meeting dated March 6, 2019. Number 4, announcing proclamations prepared for the month of March and scheduled date of presentations. Anybody wish to have any of those items pulled on the council? Anybody in the public? Lindsay, were you putting that to say anything? Okay, I thought you were putting it down to say something. Okay, sorry. Well, then we'll make a motion to approve and second, please.
So moved.
Second.
Please vote. 5 ayes, motion carries.
Real quick, can we jump back to council announcements?
Pardon me?
Council announcements.
Did I skip it?
Yep.
My apologies, everyone.
No problem.
Council announcements, please. Lindsay, you obviously have some, so please.
Yes, I just wanted to announce Friday is Coffee with a Cop at McDonald's at 8 a.m. Till 9:30. And then Saturday is the movie night here at Freedom Park, Nut Job 2 at 8 p.m.
Okay. Anybody else? I would like to make one. There's the Blue Jacket Awards meeting on the event on the 23rd. And that is a time where the community and the Navy honor all those Blue Jackets who received awards based on their performance and recognition. And so please, if anybody wants to come, please let Rika know. I believe there is still some seats available. That's all I have. Does anybody else have anything? Okay, then we will now then go to discussion and action items. Remember, Skippy, number 7 and 8. Number 5, approve a resolution authorizing the execution of the certificates and assurances of authorized agent forms for the low carbon transit operation program for the following projects. electric bus infrastructure, $58,400. Please, sir, if you would address that for us.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and City Council. The Low Carbon Transit Operations Program, or LC-TOP, is a program administered by Caltrans that provides operating and capital assistance to transit agencies to reduce greenhouse gases. So for fiscal year FY 18-19, Transit Division for the City of Ridgecrest is eligible for $58,400. It's my recommendation that we use this for an electric bus infrastructure program, specifically the installation and purchase of 2 or more level 3 fast charging stations. These stations charge the electric vehicles in about 2 to 3 hours, and they allow a 1-for-1 vehicle ratio. So basically we can convert one gasoline vehicle to an electric vehicle based in the downtime that we'll have to charge the vehicle throughout the day. It also supports our long-term goals of lowering the operating costs within the transit division by eliminating the cost of fuel and therefore lowering the fare box ratio, and also complying with California State's regulations that are coming in about having all transit vehicles converted to low or no emissions by 2029.
Any questions from council?
I had a quick one. So when are we going to start purchasing electric buses? Because we just purchased a new fleet of larger buses.
We have a grant. It was started before I got into this position that was for a gas vehicle that we're trying to convert to an electric van now. Part of the issue is we don't have infrastructure in place, so we need to line up the infrastructure to be able to work in getting it into an electric vehicle. So basically, just as we replace these vehicles, I believe most of the vehicles become eligible to be replaced in 2023. We will replace them with the electric vehicles.
I had a question on, is there any way to look into the long-term maintenance cost of, the electric vehicles over, over the long term in comparison to, standard gas, diesel burning vehicles?
I've talked to some other agencies, and they did have some challenges with the maintenance. Specifically, there's a lot more people who are qualified to work on gasoline vehicles than electric vehicles. Most of the vehicles we're looking at are converted Ford Transit vans, so they require mostly Ford maintenance, which is very similar to our current vehicles. I can begin to look into the long-term cost.
Right,
yes.
and the relationship between the cost and the increased maintenance. If that's feasible in the long term, is it more economical? I mean, yeah, it burns, doesn't burn fuel per se, but is it cost effective for the city? Basically, that's the bottom line. Is it doable? Is it? And the other question I have is it mandated by the state that we have X number of vehicles, or we have to enter into this?
Starting in 2024, every vehicle, 25% of all vehicle purchases have to be low or no emission vehicles. Anything we buy in the meantime will go towards that ratio. And then I want to say it's in 2026. It's 100%. So.
And what qualifies under the low emission vehicles? Is it just electric, or could it be?
It's battery electric, hydrogen electric, or compressed natural gas.
That's the one thing I was referring to. Okay.
Right.
So, okay. Thanks.
I have a question on the certifications and assurances under project administration, number 5. I'm going to read what it says and help me understand, and Keith, maybe you might. The lead agency certifies that they will notify Caltrans of pending litigation, disputes, or negative and its findings related to the project before receiving an allocation fund. How do we do that? How do we know about pending litigation, disputes, or negative findings? It doesn't make any sense that we would agree to that.
It has to be pending litigation that we're aware of. We get served with it, or we receive a tort claim.
So if somebody just says, so we would have to be served before we would notify them that anybody had any questions.
Well, this is a requirement. We're certifying that that we will notify them when we become aware of pending litigation in these other items. And there's a process for that.
I had just never seen that in any of the other agreements, and I was kind of surprised that, and I thought maybe it's because it was Caltrans, and that's why it was a state requirement, but okay. It just seemed a little heavy-handed.
Hello.
What, Mike?
Yes. So right now, we have no vehicles that this station would work for.
Correct.
But we plan on the next vehicle being one that would this serve.
Correct.
It makes sense to have the charging station before we have the vehicle, because otherwise you couldn't charge it, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, is there any other council discussion? Any public discussion? Okay, seeing none, a motion? Oh, I'm sorry, I guess we do.
Dave Matthews again. Well, all the good words are there. Drink the Kool-Aid. Here's our socialist government again coming in, telling us we got to do this, we got to do that. And some of it's a bunch of crap. He spoke about reducing fuel costs and buying electric vehicles and so on and so forth. Has anybody ever really done an analysis of how much electricity costs? Not just the user, the end user, but where it all comes from and how it is actually generated. I think you'd be surprised. Overall, environmentally, it's not that clean. But nobody's ever done that or taken the time to do that. It's a complex problem to start with. So we need somebody that is willing to do that. I'm urging you not to approve this, because he mentioned other things too, like liquid natural gas, and also the hydrogen fueled vehicles. The liquid natural gas would be a lot better off because you wouldn't have to wait 3 hours to get it refilled. You wouldn't have to decide whether or not you wanted to call a mechanic or an electrician if it breaks down. This is all a bunch of hogwash as far as I'm concerned. And if there is CO2 problems out there, you might look no further than the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the Forest Service. Because I learned many years ago that trees absorbed carbon dioxide and gave off oxygen. And the humans and the other mammals and so on took in oxygen and gave off CO2. So there was a balance there, but in the meantime, we cut down all the forests, and the Forest Service never dictated that they had to be replaced. Along with a lot of other builders and so on, we didn't have too many trees around here to cut down, but in other places in the world we did. So I'm totally against this for the various reasons I've already stated. Thank you.
Dave, let me make one thing clear. The funding for this does not come from the city. It comes from Caltrans, and it is in the transit division, the $58,400. Does that mean that you may not have paid for it indirectly? Clearly, we all have paid for it, but when something is mandated and says this is what you will do by 2024, was that what it was?
Mayor,
Yeah, that's
I've said many times, we need to start pushing back. Goodbye.
I understand what you're saying. I don't think too many people would disagree with you.
Well, I just have one comment. I would certainly imagine that someone at the higher levels who are making these grants available to cities has done the research that Mr. Matthews has brought up, and that being a clear-cut cost-benefit analysis between gas, electric, and every other option. Please, someone in the staff talk to this. It's at a higher level, but certainly they've done this to be able to make these things available. I don't think they're just throwing out, this is the type of bus you need to have, are they? Well, can you address that, Bart? The gentleman has a very serious concern. I'd like to, any data that you have to help put him at ease and me at ease, that'd be nice. That'd be great. Thank you.
So let me talk about three different things. Chris mentioned the hydrogen fuel cells. Now, there are other areas that we've talked to. We both went to classes where down in Thousand Palms. Yes. And they have a fairly large system down there, and they use full-size hydrogen, but they spent millions and millions of dollars setting it up. With the few buses we have, that's not realistic. The compressed natural gas, we talked about that before we ever looked at electricity, because I've seen that before. Problem is, there are no fueling stations in town at all. We would actually have to develop our own fueling station. Lastly, the electricity is not going to come from Edison per se. What it is the next thing after we get our fast charging system in. When we built the shade structures for the buses, it was all put in with conduits and everything else already, so that we could put solar cells on top. It's the wrong word. Solar panels on top, so that we create our own electricity and put it back in. Now, solar panels, there's debates out there everywhere whether the amount of stuff that's generated when you create one is worse than other things. I cannot speak to that. But what I can say is we're going to use the cleanest form of electricity that we have access to. Did that answer your question, sir?
Okay, well, yeah. Dave, did that answer your question?
Well, solar panels are not that efficient either, so stay on these.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Bart. Is there any discussion from council? Any more discussion from the public? Then a motion?
I move approval. I move approval.
Second.
Please vote. Yes. We have 4 ayes, 1 no with Mr. Heyman. Motion does carry.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you all. The next item is item number 6. Approve contract change order number 1 with the contractor Griffin Company for the quantities adjustment and extra work in the amount of $28,221.60 for the reconstruction of senior center parking lot projects, and authorize the city manager Ron Strand to sign the change order number 1. Lauren, if you would address that for us, please.
Yes, thank you, Honorable Mayor. City Council members, this item is before you tonight as a balancing change order. At the end of any project, contractor and the city will go together and go through the quantities list and come up with the final quantities, whatever it took to complete the project. And in this case, we have add items or additional quantities, and we have some deducts. In this case, the end result is we had more add items than we had deducts in the project. There were 2 of the line items. If you look at the change order, line items 8 and 9 in the change order document, you'll see that we ran long on asphalt and concrete. And so we anyway, we ran long on the quantities materials there. So that's why we're having to balance out the final contract amount with the contractor by having this change order approved. So what we're asking you to do tonight is to approve the change order in the amount of $28,221.60 to Griffith, authorize the finance director to fund the change order from the remaining tab funds, and to amend the budget to reflect all appropriate capital revenue transfer accounts to add $21,317.68 to the existing PO, and authorize our city manager, Ron Strand, to execute the change order number 1. If you have any questions, I'm available to you.
I've got two. The drive approach and the concrete, I mean, it was pretty much a finite square footage of the project. How could we be off that much?
What we found out is when you put in ADA compliant driveways, the lip or the back of this walkway is significantly lower, on the order of 6 inches below, lower. And it's no longer a matter of milling the asphalt down now to meet that back of walk or back of driveway approach. You're now into the subgrade. And so rather than restore an asphalt, it was more constructible to simply add concrete to this existing bid item rather than issue a change order to the contractor to over-excavate, recompact the base, to bring in base materials, and then the asphalt. So we elected to just simply add quantities on that existing bid item for concrete. It's the transition from the back of the walk on an ADA ramp back to match your existing grade on your asphalt in your driveway. That's where the additional quantities came in.
And this contractor had never done that before?
Well, yes, but in the there was a lack of insight on our part. I have to follow my saber on this one. And the thing we failed to realize is that the new ADA ramp, when you have a back of a driveway that's much lower, that you're going to have to, instead of just milling, you're now going to be in an excavation mode to get down to that back of the driveway. And so we failed to realize that in the design and didn't call for it. So
it was the design more than the...
Yeah, it was an oversight on our part that when you lower that driveway to meet an ADA compliance, that back walk where it's now at is now not a matter of just simply planing that asphalt, because if you start planing that asphalt, pretty soon you're into your base materials. You don't have any asphalt to mill, basically. So you're forced to then issue a change order to the contractor to say, well, we originally wanted you to just mill it and make your transform. Well, it's much deeper because of the back of the driveway is much lower. Therefore, we would like you to make that up in just extending the concrete to make your transition.
Any other questions? Have we ever run into this before? Is this something that is new that happened? I'm not sure. I understand because I've never milled asphalt. I've never done any of that. So I'm just understanding, what did we learn and how do we apply it to the next time?
Well, the knowledge now is that whenever you have an old, unconforming driveway, a non-compliant ADA driveway, and when you apply the new standard for the ADA compliant driveways, it drops that grade dramatically to where you have a much longer transition to tie in.
That's that's where it happened then, there.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that's the realization. It was simply an oversight on our part. We did not realize that on this.
Okay. Is there any other questions from council?
I don't have a question. Just as a general comment, I think it would just be absolutely delightful if sometimes these slides would come here saying that we're 28,000, 32, 52, 64 underbid, instead of constantly over. I mean, you know, if I bid a job out to something, and you get a conscience, what is it going to cost to do this job? They give you the bid, and that's it. If the guy's over, then he eats it, you know, and has to make up for it on the next job, or improves his estimation abilities. I don't know. I'm not talking about just this one, Lauren. I'm just saying I'd like to have some saying we're getting less and less and less, and we beat the budget, we did this, than to constantly have the engineers come up with a price and then we exceed it by 10, 15, 20, 30%, 10, 15, 20. I don't know. I think we need to get better at estimating, and I think that the contractors need to get better at over-delivering, and, you know, instead of over-promising, they need to over-deliver and under-promise. That's what I think.
Madam Mayor, may I?
Please.
Yes, sir. It is our goal to try to make sure that we do meet the amount allocated. I mean, we, as a general standard and a rule of thumb for any kind of construction project, you try to keep your change orders in the range of 5 to 10%. In this case, we're 11.8. So we just missed that mark of what is a range, an acceptable range for change orders. I might mention to you that we have had other successes in which we have had deducts and fallen below the amount that you folks had allocated for us. For instance, the little sewer line job on Downs that we just completed at Downs and Bowman. We're about $20,000 below what you had allocated for us. So some of them we win, some of them we lose. And it's hopefully at the end of the year, you know, everything will balance out. Unfortunately, we just can't catch everything. This was an oversight on our part. Right. We've learned from it. And so hopefully when we get to the end of the year and we look at all of our projects, it'll balance.
My comment is not on this one. It's just big picture. That's all.
Yeah.
Any other council comments? Any public comment? Okay, motion?
So moved.
Second.
Please vote. 5 ayes, motion carries.
Okay, we are skipping 7 and 8, and we're going to 9. Proposed action to approve a resolution of the City of Ridgecrest summarily vacating a portion of the south half width of East Bataan Avenue between Sunland Street and Gemstone Street. Lauren?
Yes, Honorable Mayor, City Council. This was a request by the Sunland apartment complex, the developers of that project. They had the existing right-of-way. It was designed for a collector right-of-way, in which the full width right-of-way was on the order of 90 feet in width, from edge of right-of-way to edge of right-of-way. In looking at the extent of Bataan, it didn't appear that much right-of-way was necessary to support the area. The area that the community or the neighborhoods would be very limited in the amount of vehicle load on that particular reach. The developer's engineer approached the city to see if there's some way in which a portion of that right-of-way might be relinquished back to them. They presented to us a request for vacation of a portion of that right-of-way. It amounts to 15 feet of right-of-way that they're asking to be relinquished back to them. We took a look at what the request is, and we looked at what the process would be. We determined that it's what's called a summary vacation process. And in that process, we notified the utility companies to find out if there's any easements or utilities that might be present that might drive another vacation process. We found that indeed there were no utilities or easements that would not permit us to vacate that portion of right-of-way. We also looked at the character of the right-of-way and found that It is unimproved. It had not ever been utilized. There had been no traffic upon it, and the city had never spent any kind of funds in maintenance or operation on it. So, in effect, we were able to determine that indeed it is excess right-of-way. And the terms and the criteria for doing a summary vacation of right-of-way is that if there's no utilities, if there's no easements that would complicate things, and if it is determined to be excess right-of-way, the city has no practice of spending money in maintenance, or it hasn't been utilized, then we can go through this summary vacation process. And that's where we're at tonight with you. Staff is recommending that this be declared as excess right-of-way, and that we go ahead and vacate that portion for the use of the Sunland Apartment project.
Is there any discussion from council? Questions?
Do we already have the right-of-way for the north half of this street?
Yes, sir, we do.
Is it the same thing, 45 feet?
Yes, sir, it is.
So we'll end up vacating that eventually.
If we were asked to vacate, I think we'd be safe to do so. However, the north side is the Desert Christian Center, and the condition or the method of vacating might be different depending on if utilities occupy that, and also if we've expended any money in maintenance. That could dictate the type of vacation process. Doesn't mean that it wouldn't happen, but it requires public hearings, and it's a much more complicated process for a non-summary vacation.
It's hard to see out there exactly what this is because, well, you say that the Desert Christian Center's on the north side then?
Yes, sir.
They've already put in curb, gutter, and sidewalk?
Yes, sir, they have.
Okay. So this is just vacating to go back to a standard size street?
Yes, sir. It'd be the curb-to-curb section would be 60. The right-of-way would be a 64-foot right-of-way. Ultimately, if we reduce symmetrically on both sides, north and south sides.
Thank you.
Scott?
And so, from what I gather, there's zero cost to the city on improving this?
Yes, the application, they're required to pay for staff time and the processing of these, and there's no cost to the city for this.
So it benefits the developer, and it'd be benefit to the developer and no cost to us?
No, there's no cost. There's no physical impact to the city.
Okay, thanks.
The sad thing on that is if we need to obtain a right-of-way, we got to pay for it, but when we give it back, we don't get anything for it.
That's typically because they own the property, we don't.
Any other questions from council? I would just like to ask a hypothetical question. Had there been easements under there, and I think Mike asked that same question, but help me understand it more fully. Had there been easements under there, utilities under that easement, would we have been able to do this same thing?
No, we'd
Short
have
of
to go
moving
through
those utilities?
There's a completely different vacation process, which is called a non-summary process, and which case would be that the utility company would probably want to retain their right to own, maintain, and operate that utility in perpetuity.
Okay, I just want other developers to understand if that happens again, this same circumstances we could grant, but not if there were those contingencies. Okay.
Madam Mayor, this is obviously something important for Sunland Development to make their project viable. As you well know, this is a series of things that we've worked with Sunland Development to help their project. As you well know, we've reduced a lot of our off-site improvements in accordance to the roadway. We've supported a variance for the parking spaces. Now the easement, the City Council's also deferred their impact fees for up to 4 years. We've also helped them work with the school district to keep them from incurring a cost on their school fees, because the school fees went up from $297 a square foot to $379. And we also didn't require them to put in a sewer line because that would have been expensive. And also the city also is supporting the construction of Sunland, which is significant for their phase 2. So the city's done quite a bit to try and get this project on board and in line. This is just one of the other things.
What'd you say about the sewer?
They're doing a lift to be able to get up to the sewer main instead of having to put in a line out to Bowman. But that is a project that the staff's working on to be able to put in so we can help the development over there off of Sunland by Upjohn Park.
Okay, is there any other council comments? Any other staff comments? Public comment? Okay. Motion?
So moved.
Second.
Please vote. 5 ayes, motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda. Discussion and provide guidance to the city's representative and the board of the Indian Wells Valley Groundwater Authority. Scott?
So tonight we met in closed session, the city council and our city attorney. And
Let's not talk about closed session.
No, I'm not talking about. Just saying we met, but we have there's no report from that. But
and it was listed as undisclosed.
I'm sorry?
It was listed as undisclosed litigation.
Okay. So currently I have no further update on the GA. There is a meeting tomorrow. Nothing has really changed from the last meeting. So that's really it on the report. So
Okay, is there any other council comment? Any public comment? Okay, thank you. We will then go to committee reports. Org?
We didn't meet, did we?
No.
Okay, finance? Scott?
Sure. So finance did meet this month and basically covered the initial budget for next year. The committee hopes to have the rough draft ready by April, and then or next month, and then a rough draft to the council by April. So that was it on finance.
Infrastructure?
Meets
28th.
28th, yeah, next week from tomorrow.
Next Thursday.
Parks and Rec?
We meet April 2nd.
Youth Advisory?
We did not meet.
Okay. Action Committee?
We will meet April 16th, and I'd highly encourage any members of the public to come, and especially the school district. I'd like to see some people come from there. It's always a good meeting. The resource officers, the school resource officers give reports on what they're seeing in the schools, and so it would be good to have more people in attendance of that meeting.
So are we going to meet in March?
April 16th.
April 15th?
16th.
Okay. Ridgecrest Area Visitors and Convention Bureau?
Ricky, did they put their normal report?
I don't know that I saw it.
They'll meet on the 10th.
She emailed it late this afternoon to both of us, and I didn't have a chance to print it out because it
Okay.
was late, so.
All right. How about if I'll report at the next meeting. Yes, we did meet.
Okay. Economic Development Committee?
We meet on April 10th.
Other committees, boards, and commissions?
We've got two things. Number one, I gave each council member, I'm the representative of the East Kern County Air Pollution Control District. I gave each of you a report, annual report. And tomorrow is KernCog. I was not able to go to KernCog last meeting because of the snow in Tehachapi.
Okay. Any other boards or commissions? All right. City Manager's report?
I have none.
Future agenda items? Anybody?
Yeah, I would like to ask, the third week of the month is a killer to me. I've got a meeting every night. I would like to ask that if Peggy would take the Finance Committee on a permanent basis and relieve me of that duty. And I think that probably has to be put on the agenda for approval, but I would propose that. I guess that'd be a future agenda item, if it's okay with you, Peggy.
Since those appointments were approved by council motion, then we would need to have a formal
Right,
motion
that's
to
what
change it, and therefore, yes, it would need to go on.
I need it on the next agenda, please.
Okay, any others? Mayor and council comments. Council? Okay, I have none, so we will then adjourn.
Okay.
Thank you all for coming.
Sorry, Keith, you lost.
Pardon me?